Hello, everyone. Welcome to Global Watch. This is Dr. Sean Lin. In the last few months, I think we already changed our habits, how we use our social media. We start to pay attention what we can post on Facebook. We start to grind our mind to choose words, not to use those sensitive words on the YouTube. We start to think, oh, will my tweet still be existing after a few hours? We start to think this way because we've been changed because of the digital appetite, because of the political digital appetites that we are experiencing right now. And how should conservative voice respond to these kind of censorship? Or it's kind of like a social credit systems in communist China. How do we deal with this kind of pressure? So in today's program, I invite Colonel John Mills to join me to discuss about these issues. Colonel John Mills is a senior intelligence officer from U.S. Army. He has retired, but he has decades experience in different areas in terms of national securities, cyber securities, and national intelligence. So, Colonel John Mills, thank you for joining me on today's program.
Thank you, Sean. It's an honor. It's good to be with you again.
Thank you very much for joining. Colonel Mills, so I know you write an article for Epoch Times regularly and be a very respected columnist on the Epoch Times as well. And so you write in the article regarding about the digital appetite. So at first I want to ask you, because most people when they think about appetite, immediately think about South Africa. So can you talk a little bit about why you call it a digital appetite right now?
Well, we're in a brave new world, Sean. We've never experienced this before, and we've never been there before. I've been involved with social media, Silicon Valley, the business of cybersecurity for a number of years. And I kind of saw this coming in a number of ways. Mm-hmm. We really, through the willful surrender of our data, the convenience and the service that these environments offered us, it was always very concerning because it was always clear that these different, some of them successful companies, mm-hmm. They had different worldviews than a lot of their users. At some point in time, there was going to be a collision. We're at that point of collision now. So this is very disturbing. They have successfully, we allowed this to happen, and we have to figure out what to do about it because it affects the way we live, we communicate, we do business, and if they, as we saw after January 6th, we saw a coordinated effort. And that is extremely important when applying some of these laws. Are they coordinating? Are they sharing information? Are they sharing lists of people or groups to exclude? Parler thought that okay, maybe they would be the alternative. They were ready to go. Well, the way they were set up, guess what? They were still extremely vulnerable to essentially shut down because their app, they were depending on their app being provisioned, being displayed, being offered, and being supported. You can sell an app, you can release an app, but it has to be maintained over time. And so they very effectively shut down Parler.
Yeah, and because they used Amazon's cloud-based web service, right? So if Amazon take you down, you can easily come back because you have to find other servers that can be strong enough, can be wide enough to support your large data volumes. So that's another challenge. So you mentioned about these coordinated efforts, and you mentioned you sense these trends coming, right? And so do you think they've been planning this for a long time? This collision is actually being incubated for a very long time, but we just didn't realize. We just get used to using it conveniently for all these digital tools.
Yes, did they plan on January 6th to do this 10 years ago? No, but clearly, and again, being fairly familiar with this culture, a number of these companies, there was a curious hard edge of beliefs that in many ways were not in sync with the founding of this country, with the beliefs of this of our constitutional republic, and
Hmm.
frankly, out of sync with a lot of their users and customers. We'll just make it as simple as that. So it was they were in I maneuvering for years on this topic. This was essentially a was it first degree? Was it second degree?
Hmm.
It was. They saw their opportunity and they lunged at it. And now, from this point on, there is no. It is totally out in the open, overt, and there's no debating that they are asserting a essentially a political agenda and essentially a party line that everybody must adhere to.
Hmm. So do you think actually we as public will also kind of indulge this for such a long time? Even just for the last few years, when, for example, when President Trump's tweet were delete, most people didn't take any proactive actions against Twitter, right? People, we just get used to it. We know we can't control it. They are the platform. Yeah, they are not publisher. We can't do anything like that. But at the time, people didn't sense it can be such a severe situation, right? We just basically we desensitize ourselves to this kind of abuse. So
Yes, well,
it's our own fault too, right?
it absolutely is. We did not spend time or energy. There were titans that established dominance in this market space, and we just adhered to it. But the good news here is that actually it wasn't that long ago, and the duration of market dominance of many of these firms is actually not that long. Now, I don't want to get into the naming a whole lot of names on either side, either current that dominate. Everybody kind of knows who those are.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of up and comers in both the data hosting environment. A lot of times it'll be expressed as the cloud, which is really data centers.
Mm-hmm.
That actually is a very positive upside here. Is there are many alternatives to the big name offerers in data hosting. So the question is, why in the world would you? Why was Parler hosting their data and depending on the AWS when they knew that the owner of that company had certain political viewpoints?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, that is actually one of the more easy to address situations. It was the data hosting, the cloud environment. There are many other alternatives. So I think that was a very bad business decision for Parler to bet the future on writing on the AWS environment. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why they if they're going to say they were part of free speech, they should have put two and two together and said we need to host somewhere else.
Yeah,
And
you need to be free all the way, right? Even from your basic business model, need to choose a very, very good platform. But I'm curious as well. Parler been gone for a few weeks now. Why haven't they managed to find a good alternative, to the AWS?
I don't know what's going on inside their business or I don't know what's happened, but the essentially data hosting, there are highly qualified who specialize in this, and
Mm-hmm.
moving data large quantities, maintaining what we call in the IT world confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the three critical aspects of service. This is kind of rote at this point in time. So the inability of I don't know if it was a contractual issue. I don't know if the staff just up and left at Parler. I don't know what happened. But moving data in mass like this is actually not that big of a deal. And
Mm.
maybe they don't have the A team. Maybe they don't have the B team. I don't know, but there's lots of C and D teams out there that can do this. So
Mm.
I'm not sure what happened, and it's almost easier to just start from scratch. But there is an agglomeration of for we have to be honest, for the immediate time being, a lot of the A team is in the majors of the Silicon Valley Titans, but there is a rapid evolution in this market space. So
Mm.
we should never assume that those big name companies are going to be dominant even a year from now. We were talking earlier, and how in the mobile, the little more harder to address is the mobile environment.
Mm.
Our smartphones. Okay, right now, the Android essentially dominates about 75-76% of the market, which is really, on two or three major phone offerings.
Mm.
Okay, so, wow, but we say, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to do this? But remember, even this market space changes rapidly. How it wasn't long ago that Nokia was the dominant provider. It wasn't too
Yes,
long.
maybe 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned earlier Palm Pilot. I mean Palm.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
or
BlackBerry, Palm
Lawfare.
Pilot. Yeah.
Yeah, it changes rapidly. So this is a market for money to be made in. That naturally attacks talent. That naturally attracts ability. We can do this, and there are up and coming. I don't want to start listing some of them, but there are up and coming offers that
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody's going to be surprised in a year or two about this market space. So it is not the end of the world. We,
Yes.
we got caught. We willfully went on the cattle cars here. We willfully went on into the cul-de-sac. We willfully went into the alley, and surprise, here we are.
Yeah. So, yeah, we willfully enter the cul-de-sac and we're not really prepared. But I think you make a very, very good point here is that there are definitely alternative and the market is changing very fast, right, to adapt to these situations. And so besides this good news, and you also mentioned, this kind of situations, kind of like, monopolies. So do you think on the legal aspect, we can use antitrust, laws to counter against these tech giants?
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes, maybe it's just the conservative Republican. I'm not saying this as a partisan person. I'm just making an informed observation. But
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the nature of conservatives, Republicans, libertarians to just they just want to live their lives. They just want to take care of their families, do their thing, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of they're not busybodies like the other side. They're constantly having to manipulate, push, dominate, change. And one of their forms of warfare that they have developed to great effectiveness is their use of lawfare.
Mm.
I would say we have very good legislation and very right legislation in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That
Mm.
was good law. It was brought in and enacted for a reason. We had oppression in this country. Over time, though, I will name one organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which
Mm.
has become essentially. I'm sorry, there's just numerous cases, and their financials are extremely disconcerting on how much money they have on the books overseas. Um, and they're supposedly supposed to be there to represent the black community. Yet they have internal issues in their own organization with a huge lack of black African Americans on their staff. Yet they're the Southern Poverty Law Center that were supposed to be there essentially to help enforce the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So they've taken a good law and in many ways perverted it.
Mm.
So we need to get better about lawfare, and I think one of the daunting thing that deters oftentimes Republicans, conservatives, libertarians is this perception that to do anything legal you have to be a lawyer.
Mm.
Okay, no, you don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's a lot of non-lawyers who understand law better than lawyers. I'm sorry. It's very true. But you just have to establish the legal predicate and argument, and you have to be relentless about returning over and over and over again. And if it doesn't work here, find another jurisdiction, in the federal level or on the state level. You just have to keep on doing it, and then you achieve success, and then you build upon that. And when you you achieve success in one court, it unlocks the doors in a number of other jurisdictions. So you have to establish that argument. You have to be persistent, and you just have to not take no for an answer. And you just have to return over and over and over again.
So you actually did touch upon one critical issue is about people's strong will on this kind of issue, right? You need to have this strong will because under current political climate, I remember I saw the news, even the two lawyers President Trump chose to defend him on his second impeachment trial next week. Both of them are threatened, and their legal license or maybe revoked, or their law degree may be rescinded by their home universities, law schools. And so a lot of the lawyers, they were afraid to get involved in this kind of lawfare that you mentioned. So is that the reason you're suggesting even people not lawyers can get involved into this lawfare?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are certain points in time where you do need a professional lawyer to come in, but we need to do that, and that is just incredible intimidation, and that's something that we're facing is this sudden, and we're Time Magazine just had a report about it. We're beginning to see the giddy, gleeful release of some of the members of this broad coalition that conspired to throw this election, and they've been very good at intimidating and silencing others, but they're kind of piping up now, slapping themselves on the back. That in itself gives opportunities. Well, really, you really were? I mean, if some of those things in that Time Magazine article are true, I think some of these folks might want to lawyer up because they're saying things that potential RICO violations, potential antitrust, potential violation of the Civil Rights Act. Now, Civil Rights Act at the federal level does not protect political viewpoints. However, at the state level, at a number of states, actually political viewpoints and political speech actually are protected classes. So you can achieve some wins in different states. California, I mean, of all places, California protects political speech. So that would be very interesting to see some state cases be brought up in California. And it's not even, it's as some think it's how it's lost in California because of the vast exodus of population. Because of a number of things, actually, you saw the return of a number of Republicans. And again, I'm just doing this as a political observer, informed observer, not as an advocate for one party or another. But you saw a return of a number of Republicans to seats in California. So it is not over. And if you want to look at this as a defeat, I'm not sure I'm looking at this defeat. This was a massive coordinated effort, which I think actually opens the door to opportunities to really, you guys want to pat yourself on the back about a coordinated effort? Guess what? That begins to smell of RICO. That begins to smell of antitrust. You might want to rethink making some of these comments in public.
Since you mentioned about RICO, can you elaborate a little bit more on that part? Because I think a lot of time people, when they think about RICO, they think about organized crime here, right? And so how does this law will be applied to these kind of situations?
Yeah, I think the wording on RICO, it's not necessarily organized crime, it's ongoing criminal activity. So that doesn't mean you have to be organized crime. Now, RICO has been used against other organizations. It was used to some level against those in the pro-life community. So if you establish that a member of such a group committed a criminal act, that begins to open the door to the application of RICO. That does not necessarily mean kind of your Hollywood characterization of what organized crime is or isn't. So yeah, absolutely, RICO can be applied if you could establish a criminal act took place and criminal activity is taking place. It doesn't mean it's again kind of stereotypical organized crime.
I see. And so at the same time, I think there's another big question is whether you can find a good judge, right, a jurisdiction that can really deal these cases in a fair way. Because we see so many cases, maybe in the Ninth Circuit or other places, may not be truly be impartial in this kind of situation. So what's your suggestion on this kind of situation? People should just try in different jurisdictions?
Well, yeah, there's you have to begin to establish a list of different listings of different court jurisdictions that may be sympathetic to your argument. Again, law in some ways is more of an art form. There is and a lot of these judges and court systems, they'll be very open-minded to if you work on your argument and return. A lot of times they're kind of giving in their findings and their statements and their opinions. They're in some ways kind of sometimes the term is foot stomping or hinting to you what you need to do to get your argument straight and return. So pay attention. Just because you're rejected doesn't mean that's it. It's over. It means they're actually kind of giving you a hint on how you need to improve your argument and try it again.
Right. That's a good point. And so besides this aspect, to have a alternative choice on this digital platform. So another very, very important factor is on the financial aspect, right? Because you can see these big tech giants have so much funding supporting them, and during their growth, they also acquire more funding in this process. And so for the alternative choice to grow even faster, they need to secure more funding as well. So how about the financial sectors? How can they get more support from the financial industries?
Yeah, I mean, access to capital is the lifeblood of a capitalist economy, and so it's critical. Now we've seen financial organizations, banks, lenders, hedge funds over the years now essentially start to develop essentially political positions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know. I think from a business model that starts to get very dicey because you start to be exclusive. If you're going to be exclusive, if you're going to make statements, that means you are excluding a portion of your market base. So I don't think that's really a good idea. But companies have done it now, and there's also the factor of some of these activist groups. I'll point historically to Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition during the 70s and 80s. That really, and there was a book on him called Shakedown. And it really reflected how effectively activist groups can work these essentially intimidation, coercion, and then coercion. There you go. That's a word that starts to have some applicability to RICO and antitrust issues and things like that. So some of these groups are potentially running afoul of some of these laws. But they learned how to do this. And one of the things they've really started to target is the financial organizations. I think it's a really bad idea, and I will, because it was out in the news, Bank of America, sharing lists with the
FBI.
Yeah, that's very disconcerting on several fronts. I'd like to see, the American people own this government. You cannot slap classified on everything. I spent 35 plus years living in that world. We cannot use classification to keep information from the American people. And we need to know the reason behind this sharing of information. Very disconcerting.
Since you mentioned the case, can you explain even why FBI made this kind of request to Bank of America, and should Bank of America willingly collaborate or even offering these data?
It's unclear. Don't have enough information at this point in time to understand. I mean, it's unclear that the FBI actually even made a request. It's possible Bank of America volunteered, which is even worse. So what's going on here? And so these financial institutions, this is really the lifeblood. And these activists have really learned how to reach out to these financial institutions and intimidate. So we have to start setting up our own financial systems.
Wow, that's an interesting concept. So maybe even in the future, there will be another stock exchange market only for the alternatives.
I don't like these apartheid type systems and attitudes. I think that's wrong. That's not America. So I don't like it. It's this. We didn't cause this. We didn't start this. It's being foisted upon most of America. And remember, most of America is still the majority. So all these institutions, they are not the majority of America. Even all of these activist groups, they do not represent a majority of the American. But I don't think it's right. We didn't start this, but it is being foisted upon us, and perhaps for the short term, we do need to set up alternatives, market alternatives. This is a market-based system. Let's set up. Okay, if they want to play these games of exclusion, fine. Let's set up market alternatives, and let's the consumer vote. I don't think it's going to end up well for those who want to play the apartheid game, because I think you're going to see in the end the dollars will flow to the correct and right side on these topics. But again, there's even in the financial sector, there is massive and quick evolution of the environment. So certain institutions want to behave like this. Believe me, there will be market opportunity for others. So it can happen. It can happen. Bank of America. My grandfather worked for Bank of America in many ways the golden age of Los Angeles in the 30s, before the Second World War. Bank of America was a big deal. Working in a bank was a big deal. And it was amazing. And the history of Bank of America is essentially, it was created by an immigrant to make sure immigrants had access to capital. And because in some ways they felt like they were being excluded. And here they are 100 years later, excluding. Not a good thing.
Yeah, this reminds me about the social credit system that the Chinese communist regime setting up, right? Because if you did not toe the party line, they can give you back credit, and you may not even get a loan. You may not be able to access the capitals. Right? It definitely remind me about the communist regime. I was so surprised actually the pace towards socialism is so fast in the United States.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting. I'm an optimist on this. I didn't like the way certain things turned out recently, but I'm an optimist in the end on this. I think a totalitarian system, communist China, totalitarians usually overplay their hand. Usually they do themselves in many ways. And it's funny because communist China likes to pretend it's a capitalist system. I think this is an extremely important point. Communist China is not a capitalist system. They are crony capitalists. Okay, that means the government decides who wins and who loses. That is not capitalism. That will ultimately always fail. And it's funny how characters such as Jack Ma, who until recently was such a towering personality, who knows where he is now. But he made his decision on which side he was going to align with. It doesn't look like it turned out well for him.
Yeah. Eventually, he had to, take the consequence when he chose the side, right?
Yeah. That's Kai-Fu Lee, another personality.
From Microsoft.
Yeah. He's made a decision on which side he's going to be on. Guess what? That has a price. Eventually, you'll get cross-threaded with the communist system. I guarantee it. And when you get cross-threaded in those environments, you just kind of go away. And who knows where Jack Ma is right now?
Yes. Oh, since you mentioned about the communist regime's current situations, I want to ask you one question I didn't plan before, because recently a lot of discussion about whether the Chinese communist regime will take military actions against Taiwan. Since you are the national security expert, I want you to share a few words regarding your analysis on these issues.
Well, I mean, the Secretary of State nominee Blinken has actually been quite clear in many ways, and I believe it was just this morning made a statement on holding China accountable for stability in the region. So there's been a number of reasonably positive comments coming out of some. The challenge is, they're still not there yet on their capabilities, on their mass of force, on their operational art. I think it would be a bloody mess. And I don't think that would turn out well for anybody, especially the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. It will not be a cakewalk, even if they are ultimately successful. But I don't see it yet. But we should continue to be clear and unambiguous. There are partners in the region that together, we, along with the American forces in the Pacific, and we can shift more forces over there relatively fast, that we actually numerically, quantitatively, qualitatively, I think that would be a very unwise decision for the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. And again, he has to be looking over his shoulder, because when you're in those kind of totalitarian positions, you always have to be looking over your shoulder at your inner circle, because they're the ones you have to be most concerned with.
Okay. Well, thank you for your analysis on this issue. I think probably even the top leaders in the communist regime or the People Liberation Army, they know their own true capabilities. Just a lot of time they have to show their muscles in order to gain some additional bargain chips when they deal with the United States. And so hopefully this is the same situation. I definitely hope there is no war, no military conflict in the Pacific regions. Well, go ahead.
No, I hope so also. I think it'd be very unwise. I don't think anything good would come out of this. And so I think it would be much better for calm and reasoned minds to address this matter.
Okay, so back to the digital appetite issues, and I think another issue I want to bring up is regarding about the cyber warfares, the United States being constantly defending ourselves against the Communist Party's cyber militaries, right? So on this aspect, how should United States have to have better preparation? Because just so much evidence that the Chinese government's militaries has been doing this consistently. Even new evidence, the military's cyber affair unit may be even involved in hacking the U.S. election systems too. And so, how can U.S. defend ourselves better in these digital realms?
Well, I believe it's Michael Sulmeyer. Dr. Michael Sulmeyer is going to assume, or has already assumed, a position essentially as the cyber czar at the White House. I had a chance to work with him some earlier when he was in DoD. I think he's very, very solid and high quality, and I think he'll be very good at coming up with the right policies, the right to address some of these matters. One thing during the final year of the Obama administration, there was a great level of frustration with China. The OPM breach, the Office of Personnel Management breach, was catastrophic. It was bad. And it really, in many ways, the challenge is a number of the officials, they wanted to kind of stay at the level of the abstract and address a number of these issues in kind of theoretical policy language that did not really have actionable outcomes, actionable ways ahead. That, in many ways, communicates lack of resolve, lack of interest. So I think it's very important. The public communication is extremely important on these topics. It has to be clear. It has to be unambiguous. If we're lecturing other countries, no matter who they are, that is a challenge. And that is not the best way to deal, especially when you're dealing with a totalitarian system. Lecturing in the abstract is counterproductive and is a green light to totalitarian systems to essentially do what they want to do, because it shows just a lack of resolve. So now there was one activity that had some levels of effectiveness and was not unwise or unreasonable, but that was the public indictments of a number of Chinese officials.
But it seems like this kind of punishment is so minimal, so trivial. I mean, it didn't really hurt the Chinese PLA's cyber warfare units.
Well, yes, and without demonstrative follow through. So if a communist Chinese official is named, does kind of put the skin at concern. What happens if I travel outside of China? But so even to if I go to a conference in Europe, does that mean I have to worry about the FBI arresting me? And I apologize. I don't believe we actually ever did that, but it does put a marker down. So it does have some effect, but we need
limited. Yeah,
we need more than that. That's and there was always this essentially ideology that if you fight these cyber intrusions, you create more of them. Kind of like sometimes the analog is toward the war against extremists. If you fight extremism, you create extremism.
But at the same time, I mean, the rationale is also kind of have a loophole in it, right? You cannot just sit there waiting the extremists to go even to next scale, right? So if you don't take a proactive action, if you don't take the offensive actions, you will be bombarded by all these kind of cyber attacks all the time.
Yeah. Well, again, there was great frustration in the final year of the Obama administration against the Chinese because they just were not doing. And the simple summary was, we had done everything to be nice to them, and they were not. They weren't being nice to us. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're dealing with a totalitarian system.
Yeah.
You have to invert your psychology on this. They only understand
nice to the wrong people.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. These are totalitarians. They only understand one thing, and that is winning over us. So get past this abstract, get past lecturing. Aggressive speech making and lecturing, again, only encourages. So there has to be demonstrable effect. It could be financial. It could be economic. It could any kind of others, a number of other. There's a whole menu of opportunities here. But you know, the major thing was the indictment of the officials, and that was it. I don't believe there was actually ever any arrests, extraditions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. We need a lot more than that. And so I am hoping that there is a more informed, a more assertive, and again, it cannot be lecturing in the abstract. We have to get past that. So it has to be clear, effect. It has to inflict pain on the
Yes.
communist
Yes.
Chinese, or they're not going to pay attention.
You just need to be very, very clear who you're dealing with. You are not dealing with any regular or normal government agency. You're dealing with the communist regime. Yes, it's totally different situation, right? So just like in the war, you need to know your enemy first. Otherwise, you always use the wrong strategy or tactics.
Yeah, absolutely. Their goal is simple. They want to win. They want us to lose. It's no more complicated than that. So you don't have to wrap yourself in circles analyzing the situation. We know them. We know who they are. We know what they want. You have to treat them as such. It is unambiguous what their goals are. So that and I believe Blinken had mentioned and others. Like addressing the Uyghurs. I think there's other, the Falun Gong, others that need to be, we need to making vocal, clear, unambiguous statements about that we cannot have genocide against them also. And we need to hold China accountable. Communist China has to be held accountable. We cannot lecture countries on human rights and then ignore essentially the largest on scale genocide and that is going on in the world. And that's essentially in communist China against a number of groups. We have to address that.
Yeah, we need to take action. Just talking tough is not enough. So I definitely hope the new administration can understand this and take action. Well, Colonel Mill, thank you so much for joining me on this program and share so much insight from your decades of experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
All right, we invite you again in the near future. Stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so this is today's program. We cover several aspects. We talk about digital advertise. We talk about the Bank of America collaborating with FBI. We talk about the communist regime's nonstop cyber attack on the United States, and talk about the genocide happening in China. We just in such a difficult time. So many things happen around us. They are not happening in the direction that we want. And so what can we do? How can we have a very clear mind? How do we choose the right side? Do we want to be like Jack Ma, maybe repenting on his decision right now? And so hope everyone make the right choice and an important historical moment. All right, thank you for watching today's program. This is Sean Lin. We'll see you next time.